Hello everyone, how are we? I thought we would do today a quick rundown on how I set my kayaks up. This is in order to answer some questions that I've been receiving in the last sort of 6-8 months that I thought would more easily be addressed. Because you see me in so many different kayaks, I think sometimes some people get a little confused about how I do things. But if you look at all the different kayaks, you'll see that I've set them all up pretty much the same way. I have two kayaks. They're both Wilderness Systems kayaks. They're both the Atak model. One is the 140 and one is the 120. This one here is the 120. We might quickly run through how I set them up, and I'll address the other kayaks like the Native Watersport Titan 10.5 that I had, the Perception Outlaw 11.5, Tarpon 130X, and so on. The various kayaks that you see in my videos. Every kayak that I use, I always make sure I've got a strap attached to the front handle. I use it all the time, and I don't get how other people do it. I wouldn't want to be bending down grabbing the handle all the time. I use it every time I go out regularly. Right, what we might do is we'll walk down here, start at the back on this side and go to the front. So both kayaks have a rudder. I use the rudder for the motor drive. Note, no pedal drive, okay? I use the rudder for the motor drive. I also use the rudders on windy days. If it's a windy day, I wouldn't be without the rudder, frankly. I power the motor drives with an FPV 50 amp hour battery that lives in that case. That case comes out, it's got a handle on it. You've got the waterproof plugs there. The battery itself is water resistant. That case is water and dust resistant, which adds to the water resistance of the battery itself. Both kayaks have a flag and a light. Light obviously for night or low visibility conditions. The flag to make you more visible when there are motorised traffic around you. You know, speedboats, jet skis, things like that. Also, weirdly enough, rowers. Wonder why. We'll do the crate in a minute. I have various mounts attached to both kayaks. Both the Wilderness Systems kayaks have track mounts in 3 positions on each side, which makes it really easy to add things. The 140, I have got rocket launcher tubes on the left hand side, which I put rods in. On this one here, I have a mount on this side here which can take either a rod tube or a camera boom, as you can see. Both kayaks have a mesh bag on the back of the seat. The mesh bag usually has a pair of lip grips in it and a grab anchor. If you don't know what a grab anchor is, a grab anchor clips to the anchor trolley, and you can attach that to a jetty, a buoy, a branch, whatever you like. Anchor trolley, if you don't know what that is one of these. It's a cord that runs front and back with a couple of pulleys, and you connect your anchor mechanism to the ring, and you can also use a pole, which I'll show you in a second, and then you can change the attitude of the boat simply by running it backwards and forwards. Really does make life so much easier. Simple, cheap and easy to make. You could knock that anchor trolley up there for probably less than $20. The motor is controlled by this PWM. The PWM is a pulse width modulator unit, so what it does is it gives you more infinite control over the actual motor itself. So instead of it just being 2 speeds, it is completely variable. And by using the PWM and the 50 amp hour battery with a 24 pound thrust Watersnake motor, I get between I can run it for up to 9 to 10 hours, as long as or if I'm running it absolutely flat out the entire time, I'll get nearly 3 hours out of it. gives you an indication, and a lot of that comes from this. It is mounted to a KAYAKS Atak motor mount. And this allows me just to lift it off or to just adjust it. Very simple. Seats. The seats on both kayaks are identical. They are the Wilderness Systems Air Pro Max seat. These are a fantastic seat, one of the very best on the market. Two positions, up and down. You've also got a reclining position. The seat also folds up and stands upright. If you want to, say, fly fish, for example, there's two little grooves here and the seat will sit upright in that. Both seats, I have an inflatable lumbar support fitted up on both seats. The reason I have that is, if you honestly, as good as the seats are, if you're sitting in that seat for 8-10 hours, you're going to be pretty sore. The lumbar support makes all the difference. Under the seat, I have slung a mesh bag on both seats. The idea of the mesh bag is it allows me to put this, which is what I call a junk drawer. So these are lures that I have taken off that I was using, thrown them in here. At the end of the day's fishing, I rinse them out under cold water, they drain, and then fresh water, and then they go back in their lure trays. And that just sits under the seat like so. And then under there, for my travelling position, is my net. So I've got a few different types of nets. This is the one I use most commonly. I like the long handle net. I like the EnviroNet material. It's very good on fish, and it doesn't tangle hooks quite as badly as some of the others. If I'm fishing and netting a lot, the net will usually sit up there, and the handle will sit in the G-clamp there. So I'll just sit it there, or if I go to move somewhere to stop it falling overboard, I'll just lock it down. And you'll see me do that in quite a lot of my videos. Doesn't matter which kayak, not in the tarpons, but in the native, I did that in the Perception Outlaw, and both the Wildy kayaks. I will have a rod holder sitting in an upright position like that, either here or there. And the reason I do that is if I'm de-hooking a fish, if I reel a fish in, I just throw the rod in there like that. The bail's over on the reel, so there's no tension at all in it, and I've got the fish there, and I'm working with the fish and unhooking the fish and releasing the fish. Saves the rod from going overboard. Really, really handy. Right across the boat, there are Railblazer mounts. On both kayaks, there's quite a few Railblazer mounts. So there's the mini mounts plus these ones here. These here are held down by KAYAKS Atak track mounts, and they work really, really well on the Railblazer rod holder, and it makes them really quick and simple to move should you want to move them. So you'll see all of them are mounted the same way. Righto, here, that is a motor. I also have another pod that goes there that holds a a Lowrance 7-inch sounder, and it has the one with the sounder has the battery inbuilt into the pod, and it has the transducer underneath. I also have an empty pod. This I put in if I'm in shallow rivers and so on, simply to stop all the gurgling and so on coming up through the massive scupper hole that's down there. And what the scupper hole does is it allows the motor to sit down, but it also allows a transducer to sit across there and be protected by the keel line. So I've got 3 of those pods. One with a motor, which is that. One with a transducer and a 7-inch screen and a battery, and it's completely self-contained. And then there's this one, and they're just held in. It's a modified system how I do it. I've done away with the wilderness clips So they're held in by bungees. When I want to lift them out, I just do that. Easy. Both kayaks have a hatch at the front. The Atak 140 has a large capacity hood which sits higher. Both kayaks have got rubberized coatings where your rods lie and also where your paddle parks there. Both kayaks have scupper holes. Neither of the kayaks run a seal, and I'll just make a comment on that because I do get asked quite a lot. I don't bother to try and seal them. The hatch covers do shrink and swell with the amount of sunlight they get on them, and a seal doesn't always work. Also, if you do have those scupper plugs in and you're in rough water and the seal does allow it to take on water, that full of water is going to create a big problem for you. It is designed to drain. Wilderness actually, this is not one, but they actually make dry bags designed to fit into these hatches. The Thresher was exactly the same. So everybody out there that keeps talking about sealing their Wilderness Atak and Thresher front hatches, think again. They were never designed to do that. Transducer and screen sit on a KAYAKS Atak Switchblade, which allows me to lift the transducer up and down and rotate the screen and so on. Unless of course I've got the Lowrance unit which is on the pod, which goes in there. I don't run this. Both kayaks I usually have a rod holder for trolling sitting on the right hand side. The reason I do that is because I hold my rod in my right hand. I just prefer it on the right hand side. I can easily switch it to the other side obviously. Both kayaks I've got a bowl sitting in there that has fresh water in it. So I mentioned my junk drawer. What I do is if I'm fishing the salt, I'll take the lure off, throw it in there, give it a quick rinse, throw it in the junk drawer and hose it down later on. Both kayaks I usually park my paddle on the right hand side. That is a Railblazer paddle holder, paddle clip, and mounted to it is an accessory holder, and in this case I've got a camera boom attached to it, which is often the case. Here I've got another Railblazer mount. In this case I've got another G grip sitting there. That can take a fishing rod or it can take the paddle in the paddle park. This is something that I made for myself. It cost me about $5 or $6 out of a couple of bits and pieces. It's a fiberglass pole, a foam block, float actually from a fishing shop, and I just bored that out, glued it with marine goop to the pole, and that is a parking pole which will go through that ring on the anchor trolley on that side, and you just spear that into sand or mud and adjust the anchor trolley and it'll hold you in position. A pair of pliers, usually put that on the right hand side. We talked about the tray, and up the back here, last but not least, is my standard tackle crate, which is the Wilderness Systems one. The top of it, I've just got bits and pieces, hooks, that sort of stuff mounted in there. I usually, at the moment it's set up for 4 rods. I've got another rod holder that sits here, which allows me to take 5 rods. Depending on what I'm doing, sometimes if the battery's sitting there, it'll don't run it, which is the case at the moment. And then this is modified to take I've got the rod holders sitting up at the back, so they're higher than the front ones, and the idea there is that when I pivot around in my seat, I've got easy line of sight and access into here, and I can put up to 8 of the Plano trays in there, and they're all labelled medium, large, soft plastic, top water, whatever, right? So that when I spin around, I can just flip the lid and I go, okay, I want the medium. And that's how I do that. And one of the modifications that I've got is these, which are on a bungee, and they're designed to just hook over your rod. So if you want to stop your rod from being hooked up and thrown out by a tree, or a lure from your other rod that you're casting or whatever, right? That's something else, and they're quite simple. They're just a bungee runs down through the tube and then is looped around the bottom down there. And then this one here is just down the inside down here, and it's just tied off at the bottom down here, and you just hook that over your wheel or whatever, over your rod, whatever you want to do. That is pretty much it. If I didn't say it, the seat is completely adjustable, can go backwards or forwards. So it is 3/4 of the way back at the moment, but you can see it can go a long way forward. And the foot pegs and the rudder controls, but the foot pegs can go forwards or back. So if you've got someone who's really short-legged, it's quite easy to set up. And the advantage with the seat being able to slide backwards and forwards, and one thing that this kayak does that most do not do, is by being able to slide that seat so far forward and back, it allows you to trim the kayak better. So where you have the weight located, so I mentioned that the battery at the moment, which is quite heavy, is at the back. If I've got the battery there, the trim is completely different, and you notice it straight away. So the way it paddles and the way it tracks through the water. I used to put the battery in here, and then you got the weight of the motor and the battery there. So that was completely different again. So whenever I did that, I had the seat as far back as I could, and the pedals, the foot pegs were further back. But it's actually better balanced the way it is now. Alright, I hope that is, well, that's a really quick rundown. I hope that was of some use to some of you. One of the beauties with this is that that's my standard setup. If I'm going out for an hour, I reduce it. I just don't put as much shit on it, right? If I'm going out for the whole day, that's generally how it would be. Catch you later. See you on the water.